Okay, we're going to look at the church divides, and what that means is we're going to look at the split between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox branches of Christianity that took place during the Byzantine Empire. So this is part of our exploration of the Byzantine Empire as the Golden Age. Okay, let's start off with the Roman Catholic Church. All right, these are the characteristics that are associated. First of all, the services are conducted in Latin. Okay, so you'd have to speak in Latin. In fact, Latin was used up until fairly recently, the early 1960s. The church services in Roman Catholic Church was done in Latin. It's only recently that they've actually used English so that people could actually understand what was going on. Now, the Pope has authority over all the bishops. So here's a picture of the Pope, and he's powerful and he's in charge. He is the sole individual who has the authority over everybody else in the church, including the other bishops. The Pope also claims authority over all kings and emperors. And what that means is that for someone to be a king or an emperor, they would need to be sort of appointed or accepted by the Pope. Remember, the Pope's job is to be God's spokesman on earth. If he doesn't think that a king or emperor should be in charge, he's really speaking on behalf of God. That would make many of the subjects, of course, be more loyal to the church than they might be to a particular king. That gives the Pope a lot of power. Also, priests could not get married. So in the Roman Catholic Church, priests are not allowed to get married, and obviously they still are not. And divorce is also not permitted. It wasn't permitted in the past, and it still isn't allowed in the Roman Catholic Church today. All right, so let's take a look then at the Eastern Orthodox branch of Christianity. This is the kind of Christianity that you would have found in the Byzantine Empire. Services were conducted in Greek or local languages. Okay, so even if you a member of the Eastern Orthodox Church in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church, their services might be conducted in Russian. The patriarch and other bishops head the church as a group. And what that means is the patriarch, who is sort of like the Pope, except that he doesn't have as much power as the Pope does. So the Pope in Rome, for Roman Catholicism, has a lot of power. But the patriarch in Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire, he heads the church, but only as an equal partner with the bishops. He's not the sole head. Also, the emperor claims authority over the patriarch and other bishops of the empire. And what that means is that in this case, an emperor like, let's say, Justinian, has power over the church. He has power over the patriarch. Whereas in Rome, the Pope had power over many of the kings and monarchs of Europe. In this case, the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, is actually going to have the power over the patriarch and over religion. Priests were also allowed to be married, and divorce would be allowed under certain conditions. So in the Eastern branch of Christianity, you are allowed to get a divorce provided that you meet the conditions. All right, so let's take a look at this topic as well. This is an icon, the question of what is an icon. Well, icons were religious images that were used by Eastern Christians to aid them in their devotions. What that means is their devotions are praying. And so when people in Eastern Christianity would actually pray, they oftentimes would pray to these images. And this image here on the right is an image of Mary with a baby Jesus. And it's very typical in terms of its style of a Byzantine icon. And so it would have been in the Byzantine Empire that icons became widely used, and this typical style is clearly a Byzantine style icon. Now, there was what we call a schism. A schism is another word for split. Okay, so there was a controversy over icons. So if we look early enough, there was one Catholic Church at one point, and of course it was practiced in both the Western and Eastern Empire, but there will be a split, and we'll end up with the Roman Catholic Church in the West and the Eastern Orthodox Church in the East. And of course, one of the things that started their disagreements was this controversy over icons. Again, icons are pictures of, in this case, maybe Jesus and Mary, or most of the time they're Jesus, and this is what the controversy was about. So, in 730, the Emperor Leo III banned the use of icons. So Leo III was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, and he just banned the use of icons. He didn't think it was appropriate that people should be praying to images, because again, in the Ten Commandments dictates very clearly that you shouldn't be creating imagery. Now, people rioted and the clergy rebelled. What that meant was that people had become very used to using icons or praying to icons, and so the emperor, as a political figure, telling people how to practice a religion, it didn't go over very well. So there were riots, and of course the clergy thought that this was not just a challenge to their power, but also that they were being dictated to about how they could practice their type of Christianity. And so they also rebelled against the emperor as well. Now, the Pope in Rome supported icon use. Now, it's not that the Pope in Rome saw this as a way of promoting praying to pictures of Jesus. There was probably a political component to this. The Pope realized that by supporting the use of icons, he would be challenging the power of the emperor in the Eastern Empire. So there's definitely a political component for why this would have taken place. And then this led to a permanent split in 1054. So in the year 1054, the church split. It split into a Western branch, Roman Catholic, and an Eastern branch, known as Eastern Orthodox. So here's a chart that gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on. The Great Schism, you can see, 1054, you end up with the Western Church in Rome, the Eastern Church in Constantinople. And you can see that over time, Christianity will change from this point as well. In terms of the Western Church, Roman Catholicism, you'll see in the 16th century the Reformation will happen. Now, we haven't gotten there yet in the course, but we'll get there a little later in the year. And you can see that's the Protestant Reformation. And when the Protestant Reformation occurs, because people were protesting against the church, you then end up with the Lutheran Church, the Anglican churches, the Calvinist Reformed churches, and you can see from the Anglicans you move down to Congregationalists, Society of Friends, the Methodist churches, even the Salvation Army is actually part of a Christian church. And then over here under Calvinists, we can see you'll then move towards Presbyterian and even the Baptists. This is something, type of Christianity you'll find more likely down in the southern part of the United States. Again, Roman Catholicism still came out of it intact. And on the eastern side, you can see we had the Church of Constantinople, which again you'll have the church in Cyprus and Russia, so Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. There were also other Eastern churches. There was the Armenian Church, there was the Coptic Church, which is in Egypt and Ethiopia, the Nestorian Church in Iraq, Iran, even in South India, and then you have the Jacobite Church, which is in Syria, Iraq, and India as well. So again, what's interesting when I look at this chart, all of these things on this chart are all Christianity. Every one of them is Christianity, but they're not all Roman Catholicism. So this is why it's always difficult when you ask people, what is your religion? And they say, I'm a Christian. And the first answer I look for is, well, what kind of Christianity are you? There isn't a single kind of Christianity. There's many different kinds of Christianity. But the great split, the big split, really occurred in 1054 when people began to fight over the use of icons. All right, so let's take a look at this art for a second. The question here is, how is Christian religious art in the West different than Eastern Orthodox art? So this picture here on the left-hand side of the screen is a very Western style of painting, and on the right-hand side is the Eastern Orthodox style of icon use. Both of them depict the same scene. It's a picture of Mary with baby Jesus. But you can see there's clearly a different style going on here in the type of painting and just the imagery that's being used. Okay, so for instance, for the Western style, it strives to show the holy and realistic situations. The divine seems near and familiar. Right? And in the Eastern Orthodox version, it depicts a spiritual world that's far removed from the real world. Okay, so it's not something that we would be familiar with. And the divine looks far from the human level. Jesus is a divine being. It would be something that maybe he's not just a mere person, not a normal person. Hence, the divine look is something somewhat more unusual because it's more special.